Well, it's good to be back with you guys today. Um, Happy Mother's Day to everyone that are mothers. Um, Very thankful for mine. I'm going to go see her right after this. Um, it actually was brought to my attention by multiple people last week that I held you guys over for a good little bit. I'm going to try really hard not to do that today. Although, I mean, I got to say there was some interaction, so it was kind of it was a team effort, right? Some of you that were being quiet were like, it wasn't me, so wasn't part of that team. Partly, just partly. Nah, that's on me. That's on me. Um, we'll get through it though and get you right on to lunch. But today I wanted to start off again. I know last week there was a lot that was talked about last week. And I also realized it's a tall order to ask you to remember everything that we go over in some of these classes. And so what I would like to do throughout this study together is just to, very briefly review what it is that we go over so that it's, again, usable for you guys. Because at the end of the day, we're not doing this just to hear an argument and then forget about it. This is something that is supposed to be a tool for us to be able to use. So I want to ask you guys, those of you that were here last week, can anybody kind of give me a rundown of what the cosmological argument means? I know that's putting you guys on the spot a little bit, but here's the interaction. So can anybody kind of give me just a very, low rundown on what that was? Or if you can just point out something about it. You don't even have to tell me exactly how the argument flows. Okay, that's a great place to start, right? You're talking about the law of causality, and that was really a main ingredient of what we were talking about last week. And again, if you're looking at it from a psychological, not psychological, but philosophical argument standpoint, it is two premises with a conclusion that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That's generally how it's formed. Now, I'm not asking you to go up to somebody and say, I have an argument called the cosmological argument. Here's the first two premises and the conclusion in that order. That's kind of a rigid and academic, not very natural way to have a conversation with someone, right? That's not what I'm trying to do here. But what I'm trying to do is give you guys this usable version in that you ask the question, well, where did this come from? If we're looking for natural explanations of things, can you help me understand where this comes from? Because if you can explain it to me in those terms, I'm open. But what you're going to find is that you get to a certain point where science breaks down and cannot explain after a certain point. And really, you have to come to the conclusion in very broad terms that either you believe something has come from nothing, which, again, that's not something an intellectually honest person will admit will happen, or something's always existed. And that's why multiple theories for a long time that the universe has always existed, or that the infinitely small dot period of what was the source of the Big Bang maybe have always existed, or a multiverse has always existed, where there's a universe generator that's popping out universes, which again, you got to ask, where does that come from? You got to believe something has either existed always or something has come from nothing. And that really forces someone to come to grips with something outside of nature. It's a great starting place. And again, it helps level the playing field of someone that may not think someone who's religious in nature has a logical way of thinking about it. And that's the purpose of this. So it's a starting point. It's not a foolproof, hey, this proves the existence of God. Here you go. We can be done with this. That's not at all what it is. And I don't want to mislead you in that way. But it's a great place to start. And a great place to go from it is the argument that we're looking at today, which is the teleological argument, or better known as probably the fine-tune or design argument. That there is an immense amount of design and fine-tuning we find not only within the biological life that we see on this planet, But within the solar system, the galaxy, the universe in of itself, and the constants that dictate how things move and interact with one another, there is an amazing amount of fine-tuning that has occurred to allow it to exist the way that it does so that life can exist. If any one of these constants are thrown out of whack just a little, we wouldn't be here. That's really the takeaway. But I want to show you examples of that today. Because there are many, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, we can't get into all of them. We could, if you wanted to do that, that could be an entire series I could probably do for an entire year. There's so many things we could get into on that. I don't want to be exhaustive, but I want to give you some good examples to go to, but there are plenty more to find. And if you want resources, you can come find me after and I can tell you about it. But we're going to actually start with a short video that has some really good animations that show just how small or fine these constants, the line is. I think they're pulling it up for us now. If it were changed in one way or another, things wouldn't be the way that they are now. So I don't know if the sound's on yet. We may not have sound. I don't think I can read that fast.
The shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully done.
Okay. All right.
From galaxies and stars down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers. These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range. If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere. There'd be no stars, no life, no planets, no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist. To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life couldn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life. Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would again be life prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon? There are 3 live options. The fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible? According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting. The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature. There's no reason or evidence suggests that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that odds are life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse. It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
Back to my PowerPoint there. Okay, I wanted to show you that short video because it packs in a lot of things that to get it all on PowerPoint slide would maybe be a little difficult. And it always helps to have a visual learning tool or aid there. But one of the things covered in that video that was really astounding, again, what I hope that it helped you see was that if things were different by a very, very small amount, things wouldn't be the way they are now. And how things got to be the way that they are, when you ask someone else that may not have the belief system we do, if you ask an atheist, if you ask an atheistic evolutionist, you're probably going to get the answer that this was a result of the Big Bang. That's mostly the answer you're going to get. And what we know about the Big Bang is that it's an explosion. Things exploded into existence. It was an unguided, undesigned, accidental event. How much order have we ever seen come from an explosion, first of all, that may have even been planned? I've not seen any. I don't think we've ever observed order coming from chaos like that, especially from an unplanned, accidental, unguided process like the Big Bang. And so what we see here are so many things that have to be so fine-tuned to allow us as humans on this planet to exist. It becomes overwhelming logically to believe anything but design put these things here in place. And again, I wanted to show you a couple of different examples of that today because there's good evidence to believe that, to logically believe that. And that's really a big point of this class. Stephen Hawking said this, and this was mentioned in the video, but I think it's worth reading. If the expansion rate of the universe here was 1 second after the Big Bang, what he considers the Big Bang, had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, it would have collapsed before it reached its present size. And on the other hand, had it been greater by a part in a million, the universe would have expanded too rapidly for stars to form. So this is Stephen Hawking, one of the most brilliant minds in the modern age, theoretical physicist. He has stated this himself. There are many physicists and astrophysicists that recognize the amazingly fine-tuning that has occurred. And I mean, a lot of the quotes up there, they were physicists that have said this. They have studied this. They see it. And their language, as you probably noticed, said, man, it almost seems like it is, or it appears to be. That's pretty specific language, because they're still not going to concede the ground that it is designed. They're not going to say that there is a designer, because that's not something that they're willing to believe just yet. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't extremely smart physicists out there that don't believe in God, because there are. There very much are. They don't really get in the limelight very often. But even the atheistic physicists still admit, man, it really looks like it's designed. Now, if you get into a conversation about it, it's just the appearance. Don't believe that it actually is. It just had to happen this way. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But I think it's worth pointing out that the people that would tell you a God doesn't exist concedes the ground that there are many things here that probably shouldn't have happened unless someone designed it to be that way. And again, the gravitational force, if it was altered by 1 part in the 40th, stars would not exist, and neither would we, which was expanded upon in there. And I liked how it showed, if you put it on a dial, if you actually move that dial one way or another, the amount of space, I mean, it's hard for me to comprehend, and I'm sure it's hard for you to comprehend. You really can't see how small of a movement that would be. You really almost have to look at it on a microscopic scale. When we look at our position in the solar system, Earth, we really have a lot of conditions that have to be met in order for life to exist here on the planet the way that it does today. Okay, the position of the Earth, did this go off? Okay, it's back, is in the perfect position to support life. The distance from the sun, we are in the Goldilocks space, so to speak, or the zone. Sorry, didn't turn off my ringer here. I'm on call, by the way, so I always have to have my ringer on. If I get a call and have to run out of here, you know why that is. I got a call, but hopefully that won't happen this month. Anyways, back on topic. So the distance from the sun, I think it's pretty easy for us to recognize that if we were a little closer, things would be a lot more toasty. Really what happens is the water cycle breaks down. Things would evaporate. Water would not be able to be in the liquid or solid state. Don't really know why my mic's cutting in and out on me. I might just have to talk loud. Up top, if I turned off my mic and just spoke loudly, would that be a problem for you guys? It would be a problem? Yeah. It doesn't, it's just warbly. Okay, but you guys can still understand me? Okay, all right, well, we'll just keep going. Okay, sorry about that. But if the distance of the Earth from the sun were a little closer, everything would be evaporated. The water would be evaporated. The water cycle would not work the way that it does now. It'd be scorched earth. If it were a little further away, the water cycle would still be disrupted. Things would be frozen. You wouldn't get liquid water, which, again, is pretty important for us. Seeing as you and I are made up of 60% of water, the entire surface of the Earth is covered in 71% of water. And most of the life on Earth, if you count it by number, is in the water. And if it's not in the water, it still requires water to live. So water becomes pretty important for us to live. If we were a little closer, a little further away from the sun, that becomes a big issue. Now, the position of the moon is another big one. And I want to go ahead and just go to this next slide. Sorry. I'm behind all my slides. I don't know if you can see this. There. It doesn't show up on an LED screen. Anyways, okay. So what you're seeing here, for those of you that can see it, Earth obviously is the little blue one. There's an arrow pointing down to the moon. And obviously the big red dot is the sun. I know these things are pretty obvious for you guys, but there's some pretty interesting things to point out here. Is that not only is it the perfect distance from the sun, the tilt at which it spins on its axis is really important. The way that it's actually tilted allows us to have the climate and the seasons that we have at the 23.5 degree tilt. That's the optimal tilt for us to have. If it were 22.5 or 24.5 degrees, no animal life. And that's one degrees. That's pretty significant. That's most standard deviation in statistics don't go down just to 1. Anyways, what helps us with that is the position of the moon. I know I don't know how you feel about the moon. Some of us really like it. Some of us don't ever think about it. And I know if we're thinking about the moon, yeah, it affects our tides, that kind of thing, which it does. But it actually, probably the most important functions of the moon is that it keeps us stable in the tilt that we are right here. It actually keeps us at that 23.5 degree tilt. It acts as a counterbalance for us as we're rotating and revolving around the sun. If the moon wasn't there acting as a counterbalance, our tilt would absolutely vary quite a bit. So be thankful for the moon. It helps us out a lot. Let me get back into here. My screen locks quite a bit quicker than I'd want it to. Also, gas giants like Jupiter. I know that I mentioned this last time, but I think it's worth bringing up again, is that not only the moon helps us out, and again, let's take a look at what we have so far. We've already ended up in the Goldilocks zone of our solar system. We are not too close. We're not too far away from the sun. Okay, we got lucky. Well, we're also tilted just right to the degree so that climate and seasons occur the way that they do. And in order to keep us where we are in that tilt, we have a perfect size moon that if it were any bigger or smaller or further or closer to us, wouldn't keep us on that tilt. It's in the perfect position to act as a counterbalance as well. These things start really adding up, and the chance that it happened by chance really starts becoming hard to believe. It's hard to adhere to the idea that an explosion got us to this point. At least it is for me. Now, we've also got some other helpers in our solar system that keep us safe. I did cover this one a little bit last time. Jupiter. Thank God for Jupiter. Why would you say that? It is our biggest planet. Besides, the stars are different, but it's the biggest planet in our solar system. Can anybody tell me what that big red dot is? What the name is? I kind of just gave it to you. It's the great red dot. Can anybody tell me what it is? Does anybody know what it is? Yes, it is a storm. That thing is a storm. Does anybody know how big this thing is? The circumference of it is 1.5 times, or actually the diameter of it is 1.5 times the diameter of the Earth. That gives you an idea of just how big Jupiter is. And recent studies have found that it is actually 300 miles deep. That's 40 times deeper than the Mariana Trench. Just to give you a little bit of perspective. What Jupiter does for us, and I know that you can't maybe not really see it, and I try to get a pretty high resolution picture of it. There are actually stars all over the planet where cosmic trash like asteroids, comets, things of that nature have collided with Jupiter because of its gravitational pull. It actually is so big that it sucks in a lot of the rock out in the solar system that would be heading towards Earth, gets trapped in its gravitational pull and impacts Jupiter, or it slings it out in a different direction from Earth. So it actually protects us, and Saturn does a lot of the same thing. I did read that one of the impacts, there was a big brown spot, I don't think we can see it on this picture, that was nearly 2,000 miles across, where an asteroid had struck it. That would have caused major extinction on Earth, that would have hit us. So again, thank God for Jupiter. Its gravitational pull and its position in the solar system really helps us out. Now, I'm fixing to go into a different example right on the other end, because I could stay in the solar system all day long, but I want to move to the opposite end of the spectrum. Get right here. We're going to look at the atom. I know that's kind of exciting. So you're feeling like you're really back in your old science class, right? I'm sure everybody has seen this. If you watch The Big Bang Theory, you probably see this every time the show would come on. But this is what, in a general sense, an atom looks like. It's made up of 3 basic components. And I say basic, not that they're basic themselves, but just as for explanation purposes. You have a neutron, which is the neutral charged particle. You have a proton, which is the positive charged particle. And you have electrons, which are the negatively charged particle. Atoms are what make up everything. They make up the elements, which then combine to make molecules, which bind and make up everything else we see. Okay? If the proton, the positively charged particle, which is the green, one of the green little circle spheres in the center, was only 0.2% more massive, a little larger, 0.2%, then the atom could not exist in this state, and hydrogen would not be able to be formed. Is that bad? Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's actually the most abundant element in the universe that we know right now, and it's a pretty key ingredient to water. You got to have 2 of them with oxygen to make water. You know, and again, as I've already established, we're mostly made up of water. Our brain, 78% of our brain is water. Kind of need hydrogen. And it also affects carbon. The carbon, which I didn't put up here, I don't want to get too exhaustive with chemistry up here on our slides, but carbon, obviously, we're carbon-based beings, and a lot of the things that we consume, it has to be made of carbon. Now, carbon's atoms are astounding, and they have a lot of capabilities. And a Cambridge astronomer, Fred Hull, wrote this. And again, a portion of this has already been stated in that video, but I wanted to read this. Some calculating intellect must have designed the properties of the carbon atom. Otherwise, the chance of my finding such an atom through the blind forces of nature would be utterly minuscule. And a common sense interpretation of the fact suggests a super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry, biology, and there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. Now, again, I bring up all these things, and we're not completely done going over some well, we're almost done because we're almost out of time. But I'm not going to keep you, I promise, too late this time. But what I'm trying to get at is this. I could give you, I'm telling you, so many more examples. But I think this quote really does show you exactly how a lot of people who study this their entire lives that are brilliant minds come to the conclusion, and he says it, common sense would state this must be designed. When we look at how things work together and how finely tuned they are, it doesn't make sense that this happened from chance and an unguided, unintelligent process, something that does not have the capability of putting design in anything. Why would I put my blind faith into something like that when I have a lot of evidence contrary to that fact? Again, not coming out and saying it absolutes. This is an argument, again, to show what's the best reason. What is the best answer for the design and the fine-tuning that we see? There's a designer. That would be the best answer. That's the most common sense answer that many people who probably are not Christians would even say themselves, as quoted. Oh, here we go. 4. And this one is really where my mind typically goes to. And this is one that, if you're in a pinch, go to. And this one works pretty well in conjunction with the last argument we went over. The Law of Biogenesis. Okay? The Law of Biogenesis states that life must come from pre-existing life. Okay, 5 minutes. We're going to get this done in 5 minutes. Promise. I'm aware. Life must come from pre-existing life. Okay? Now, granted, as stated last week, when the Big Bang, before the Big Bang happened, natural law hadn't been established the way that it is now in that worldview. But here's the thing, after the Big Bang happened, natural law has been established. At some point, life came from something non-living. That's what you have to believe if you don't think there's a God, an all-powerful being that can grant life to other things, that can create life. Again, it goes back to you got to believe something came from nothing or something has always existed. In much the same way, the law of biogenesis, a biological law, which doesn't happen very often, life has to come from pre-existing life. Science has not been able to determine how life has began outside of a creator putting it here. There's been no answer yet. And I have a sneaking suspicion that it won't. There are a few experiments that have been conducted to try to create some amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. Within proteins are the building blocks of life. I'm sure you've heard this. And there have been some essential amino acids created out of some experiments. Hasn't created life. And guess what? There was a lot of fine-tuning to these experiments. There was a mind behind the experiment driving it, and they could not create life themselves. And you expect me to believe that life came from a non-guided system. That is, again, what I want to show you guys, that you have the ability to logically believe that there's a designer, because it's honestly the best answer. Now, before we leave, I do want to go to some counter arguments. Again, I don't want to leave you with just the happy feel-good stuff from us, because look, people aren't just sitting around not knowing that we're having these conversations and that these arguments don't exist. So, counter arguments to this: if there's a chance it could happen, all it had to do was happen once. That's it. We're here. Done. I mean, that's the answer you may get sometimes. No matter how illogical it may be to believe this, it happened. We can move on from it. Again, I think it takes more blind faith to believe that. And when you look at the evidence, it's much greater for a designer. However, that is an argument you might run into. Another one, and this one we're going to get into a little more once we actually get into our study of evolution, which evolution is in of itself a counter argument to this, is that everything has evolved the way that it has over millions and millions, billions of years. The time that it takes for random mutation and natural selection to occur genetically form everything that we see here. Then vestigial structures and organs. Well, this doesn't show design. This shows that there's flaws. This shows that evolution exists because at one point this was useful and now it's not. Example, how many times have you heard that the appendix is a vestigial organ. I don't know if you heard that or not, but that's kind of the one that people point towards. And for a very long time, our tailbone, vestigial. If you look up, I think the last time that it was in print, it was in 1989 in science books that the tailbone was thought of as a vestigial organ. It turns out there's a lot of little tiny muscles that attach to your tailbone that make it really hard to sit and do a whole lot of things if you don't have your tailbone. But they say that it was the leftovers of when we used to have a tail. And look, I'm not trying to laugh at anybody for anything, but at the same time, it does serve a purpose. And I remember somebody that made the argument, hey, I'll pay for the surgery to go and let you have it removed and see how your quality of life changes. There's a function for it. And what's interesting, and I'll let you go after this, what's interesting about the appendix is now they're coming out, new studies have found that good bacteria for the gut actually reside there, and it actually serves a purpose for gut health. You can live without it. And that was one of the main arguments that's like, yeah, you can absolutely live without this. Well, you can also live without your eyes, without your ears, without your hands, arms, legs. What kind of quality of life is that, though? Doesn't mean they don't have a purpose. So again, those are some of the things you may run into, and I know I'm running out of time. I wanted to briefly go over that. If you have questions, concerns, things like that, I know we're out of time. Please come find me. We can talk about it. I know we still covered a lot today, but any comments or questions? There may be somebody threatening, like, don't you dare say anything. Well, if not, we'll go ahead and end in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for all the many blessings of it. We're so grateful for the amazing design that we see in this world, that we have within our bodies, within the solar system. Lord, we're so thankful for all that you've done for us. We know that you are the creator, and we know that you are present in our lives. Lord, I pray that we do what we can do to be better Christians each and every day. Help us to focus on those things that would help us meet that end. Lord, we're so thankful again for our mothers, for all that they have done for us. Lord, help us to be grateful and mindful of them today. Show them our appreciation. And Lord, I pray as we go out this week, help us to be the Christians you would have us to be, the examples that would lead others to Christ. Lord, help us again to have a ready defense so that we please you in everything that we do. Lord, we know that there are so many people hurting, that there are so many people that have lost loved ones, that are going through sickness and disease. I pray that you be with each one's specific situation, help strengthen them, help guide them in the way that they need to go, and help heal them from whatever it is that they are struggling. Lord, I pray again that we focus our minds most of all on Jesus. Help us to emulate him in everything that we do. We're so thankful for him and his sacrifice. We ask this all in his most high, holy, and amazing name. Amen.